your electrifying hosts of Exploring the Bizarre, Timothy Beckley and Tim Swartz.
Oh, I think this is the third time we've been out here in a pine bush in the Hudson Valley looking for UFOs. We've been out here for a couple of hours. We haven't seen anything that I'd even consider would come close to a UFO, Tim.
Boy, are you blind? We've had at least 3 craft come overhead. Didn't you see them with their landing lights?
Oh, come on. Those weren't UFOs. They were just commercial planes coming in for a landing at some airport nearby.
Jesus, you sure are gullible. Those planes, as you call them, they're definitely spaceships. They've just learned to disguise themselves so they can keep a low profile and go about their appointed task without interruption. They're keeping themselves camouflaged so they won't be recognized for what they truly are.
Yeah, pretty soon you're going to tell me they're going to be able to change shape as well.
Well, you're getting it now.
Huh?
But our guest, but our guest tonight can fill us in on the details as to the who, what, where, and why.
Well, okay then. In the meantime, I say let's get back to the KCOR studios before one of those shape-shifting UFOs lands on our head.
Okay, Tim. And by the way, this show is dedicated to the late Ellen Crystal. Without her, there would be no Pine Bush, probably.
Well, there'd be a pine bush. There just wouldn't be
the
Pine Bush UFO sightings.
Yes, yeah, that's right. There would be no MIB sitting in the back of the police car on the Pine Bush Festival weekend, and there would be no strange green aliens walking the street, and no lectures by Peter Robbins. That's for sure. But I'm really excited about our program tonight because we've got a wonderful guest. And it's a subject that I'm fascinated with. In fact, I've just learned and done some of my own research about morphing UFOs. In fact, we have a book out. Well, I've got 2 great books in my lap. One is by Bruce and one that we've put together. And we're going to be talking about both of them. Ours is Deja Vu, UFOs Over and Over Again. It's about shapeshifters, skinwalkers, alien portals and gateways to other realms. And then on a little bit more scientific bent is Mr. Cornet's or Dr. Cornet's book, Unconventional Aerial Phenomena in the Hudson and Wallkill River Valley of New York. So it's going to be a good one, and we should get started by you giving us a little bit of background info on our guest tonight.
Oh, it'd be my pleasure. Well, once again, I'm very happy that Dr. Bruce Cornet has agreed to join us on Exploring the Bizarre. Now, Dr. Cornet conducted extensive investigations concerning the Pine Bush, New York UFO sightings. During his investigations, Dr. Cornet had his own personal experiences in which he obtained video and audio recordings of UFOs. Now, Dr. Cornet also initiated a research project to install passive detection and monitoring devices at UFO hotspots around the United States. Dr. Cornet has 14 years experience in the oil industry as a senior geologist, prospect geologist, and I'm not going to pronounce. I'm not even sure how to pronounce this. What is this, Dr. Cornet? Paleontologist? Palynologist. All right. He has 4 years of academic research in geology as a palynologist, as you said, and a well site geologist. He's the author and co-author of 21 referred scientific papers and 2 books. And so, Dr. Cornet, thank you very much for being with us tonight on Exploring the Bizarre.
Well, thank you for having me, Tim. I hope I can live up to your expectations.
Well, you always do. Otherwise, this is your 3rd time on the program, I think, isn't it?
Yes, back in March of 2017, and then November of 2018, and now. Yeah.
There you go. Well, I think we should start out by let's do. We've talked about Pine Bush, obviously, in the past, but we're getting new listeners all the time. Let's spend the first opening a few minutes telling us how you got involved in the UFO flap there, and what it actually constitutes, because that'll kind of morph. Good word, right? Morph into your more recent discoveries and what's going on there, and the ability of these objects to change shape right in front of the witnesses, which some people have kind of ridiculed. But, I mean, I know that this was going on because we've done research of our own, which backs this up. And we'll talk about that a little bit later on, but we want to give you the time. Let's start back when it first started.
Okay. This would be 1992. That would be 2 years after my wife had died, unfortunately, at 40 years old, and I was recovering from that morning, and I was working at Lamont Doherty Earth Observatory in Palisades, New York, which is part of Columbia University, and I was working as a well site geologist, describing cores that were coming out of 7 wells in the Newark Basin in New Jersey. And I watched this television program called Intruders on television, and I was surprised that they were talking about alien visitations and abductions. And this was based on a book by Bud Hopkins and Dr. John Mack. And so being surprised that this type of subject was getting prime television time, since I'd never seen a show like this in the early evenings, I went to the bookstore the next day or two and asked the manager if he happened to have the book, Intruders, and he said yes. And he took me over to the bookshelf and pulled it out, and then he said, I think you need to read this other book too. And I said, all right. I said, it's about the sightings here locally, and it was Silent Invasion by Ellen Crystal. So I purchased both books, and when I started reading Silent Invasion, I was literally blown away. I mean, this was about sightings that were occurring right in my own backyard, literally. I mean, I was living in Middletown, New York at the time, and Ellen was seeing sightings all along Route 204 East, going over to Montgomery, and then connecting to Route 54 to Pine Bush. And she was describing stuff all over that area. And I said, no way. I haven't seen anything like this. And most people who are unaware that this phenomena is happening wouldn't expect to look up at every thing that flew overhead that looked like a jet and sounded like a jet. And so I was able to get her phone number from some friends, and I called her and asked her about it. I said, would you take me out into the field with you? Because I'd like to see this for myself. And she said, sure. So she said, tomorrow night I'm going to be going into the field with some friends, and I'll stop by your place and pick you up. Well, that first evening out, Tim, I didn't know what to expect. I mean, here I am, a scientist who was educated at major universities and was working on strictly scientific data and acquiring knowledge about our Earth. And I was seeing these craft circling around us and diving into neighboring fields, or coming up out of those fields and then flying away.
Mm-hmm.
And what's going on here? There's no airport nearby. There's the Orange County Airport that was about maybe 5-6 miles away, and then there was the Stewart International Airport, which was 10 to 15 miles away, and there were no local landing strips. And yet here were these craft. I think one of the first ones I saw was this set of lights that came from the west up over this ridge. We call it Thompson Ridge. That was behind us. We were on West Searsville Road, which runs north-south, and it stopped right on top of the ridge, hovering. Planes don't do this. Well, maybe this was a helicopter. It rotated to its right and followed the ridge down to a beacon, which the conventional aircraft use to align up with the airport runway at Stewart Airport. And then it turned to its left and proceeded across the field that we were on the edge of, then turned again, came back right opposite where we were. If it had gone straight and hadn't stopped, it would have flown directly over us. So we got the idea that the pilot didn't want to have a good look at it, at his craft. And when he got right over up over the field in front of us, it dove down past the trees and it disappeared. And I mean,
now,
it literally.
Okay, I just have okay, I have one question here. All right, so this was 1992, you said, right?
True.
But
right.
there had been, there had been previous sightings in what we call the Hudson Valley, going back to the mid 1980s. Would you consider part of these sightings in Pine Bush part of that flap?
Yes, actually, it was a separate flap. That the one that Hynek and Ambronio talk about in Night Siege happened between 1981 and 1986, and it happened further to the northeast over the Hudson Valley itself. But we were in the Wallkill River Valley, which was to the west of that area of major sightings.
About how many miles?
Oh, you're talking about 20 to 30 miles.
Well, that's not, as far as the UFO goes, that's pretty darn close.
Yeah, that's pretty close. And a lot of those bigger craft were seen over Pine Bush, too. So Pine Bush was on the margin of that flap. And then the flap, a flap did occur when Ellen took me out into the field, and things were really picking up at that particular time. And later that same year, in August 6th, there were 3 craft that were spotted coming across the Wallkill River from the Hudson River, and they were sighted by different people. I had my own personal sighting where I was in Middletown. The Cromptons had a sighting of a circular disc over their house halfway between us and the Hudson River. And then Ellen Crystal, she was coming home from or up to do some sighting work, and she was coming along Route 17, which is east-west, and she saw this huge ship parked over the highway. She pulled off to the side of the road and started videotaping it. And what was funny about this is it was of the size and shape of the Westchester Boomerang, and it stopped right just west of a town in New York called Chester. So it was just west of Chester, New York. And when we all got realized what was going on, sightings, television producers found out about it, and they interviewed all of us and had us on their show. So that was really the beginning of a whole wave of activity that happened in 92, 93, 94, 95, and it started to slow down in 96. And then there was a little bit of a spurt of activity in 97. Then suddenly, all activity stopped. And it gradually picked up a couple of years later. So by 1999, 2000, sightings were again becoming more frequent.
Linda Zimmerman, who we've had on the program, has kept it pretty well up to date on sightings in that entire area. I mean, she's done a great job of lecturing on this and writing a couple of books which have been well received. And so probably, though, that you say a decrease in sightings, but it's just maybe because the sightings may go on, but you're not there to investigate them and record them. And the media has seemed to have dropped any attention to the subject, but that may pick up too. You never can tell when somebody, like one of these new TV shows on the History or Travel Channel may decide, well, maybe because we'll call them and and tell them that they ought to get their damn asses down there and start doing some,
Right.
serious field work. Okay, now some people have been critical of you because you claim that these objects, this manta ray and these other things that you see, are disguising themselves as ordinary aircraft. How did you first discover that these UFOs were morphing and were able to camouflage themselves?
Okay. First off, one of the things I quickly realized is that many of them, especially the triangles, they had lights on them that resembled wingtip navigation lights, and they had lights on poles sticking out the front and back to simulate lights on the forward and the back of the fuselage of conventional airframes. And when they flew over us, you could actually see the shape of the craft and realize that this wasn't a normal airplane. Now, as a scientist, I realized that my word was not good enough. I needed scientific data to be able to document what was actually going on. And there were two major discoveries that completely wiped out the idea that these were conventional aircraft and that I was just, seeing something in the sky that was actually a conventional aircraft. And that was that the lights on these craft were all plasmas. They were not lamps. And my photographs did thousands of time exposures of these craft, and they would come out and put on these performances in front of our cameras. What conventional aircraft or pilots or even military pilots would put on performances for people on the ground, which, were looking for sightings. And I realized with the photographs that I was getting that there was something very wrong about the lights, especially when they would brighten up. And typically when a performance began, the craft would rise up from a farm field behind a tree row and start climbing as it was coming towards us. And as it was rising and coming towards us, it would brighten its outer two lights to the intensity of the moon. I mean, they were brilliant lights.
Wow.
And I get this on film. And there was simply no way that
your book has dozens, if not 100 or more photographs of these things that you've taken. And it's remarkable that these objects seemingly have the ability to stop and hover, but they also have the ability to fly sideways and backward.
Yes. And the second important discovery with smoking gun was that I recorded the sounds of these. And remember, I came to the conclusion in my book that they were trying to camouflage themselves by mimicking the lights and the sounds of conventional aircraft, because conventional aircraft were flying across the valley all the time. And so as not to disturb or be recognized as something different, they created their shapes in a way that would resemble conventional aircraft for somebody who was just looking up. Then we were constantly being fooled by these craft. We say, what is that? No, that's just an airplane. It sounds like an airplane. I saw wings on it, and it must have been an airplane. But if I hadn't taken the video or I hadn't taken the time exposures, I wouldn't have had the data to be able to prove otherwise. The sounds on these craft also were very different from that of conventional aircraft. I recorded the sounds of conventional aircraft taking off at Stewart Airport and other airports, and they have a very distinctive range of frequencies, including white noise. You know what white noise is, right?
Why don't you describe it to the listeners who may not know?
White noise is engine noise, a very high-pitched engine noise. It's up in the tens of thousands of kilohertz, above the basic rumble of the engine itself. And the engine noise itself, which is down around maybe only in the hundreds of kilohertz, is rarely broken up into individual bands. I mean, there are some different frequencies of different parts of the turbofan engines that are producing independent sounds. But the sounds that I got from these craft invariably were divided up into 10 to 12 separate frequencies, very discrete frequencies that paralleled one another. And the second problem was that the sounds frequencies dropped as the object was coming towards the microphone. So, and then as the craft moved away, the frequencies increased. Now that's the exact opposite of the Doppler effect. And the Doppler effect, as a sound source is coming towards a microphone, the frequencies will appear to increase because of the shortening distance. And as the sound source moves away, the frequencies will drop in pitch because of the increasing distance between the source and the microphone. But with all of these crafts, without exception, they produced what I call reverse Doppler. And that has recently been determined to be an effect of these metamaterial hulls that they've been studying of crashed UFO material.
Yeah. Okay. Well, now
they reverse the Doppler.
Okay. That brings up a point that I wanted to ask you about. There are some photographs on the internet that are connected to you that looks like some of this material, this something that might have been part of a crashed UFO. And I know that you
metamaterial, right?
Yeah, metamaterial. And I know that you've worked with Bob Bigelow. Is this an alien artifact or some sort of physical evidence of these sightings that you have in your possession?
I don't have any of this in my possession. These are all photographs that have been recovered and published from Japan, from Roswell, and from the Welsh area of England. And they all have the same honeycomb internal structure that distinguishes them. And that is an amazing thing that people wonder whether or not we actually have alien hardware from the craft in our studying it. And the answer is absolutely yes.
All right, let me interrupt you here. Let me interrupt you here because we have to go to our bottom of the hour break. When we come back, we'll continue our conversation with Dr. Bruce Cornett on exploring the bizarre.
Now back to exploring the bizarre with two of the most electrifying researchers in the paranormal, your hosts, Timothy Beckley and Tim Swartz.
All right, welcome back to Exploring the Bizarre. I'm Tim Swartz. Tonight we are talking with Dr. Bruce Cornett. And Bruce, before we continue our conversation about the metamaterials, we have a comment from one of our listeners named Echo. And Echo commented that these UFOs, craft, whatever, they're not flying, they're moving. Flying your vessel has to produce lift, and these things don't need to produce lift. So I found that interesting. And Echo also said, research pink noise. You'll be surprised. Yes, because it's pink noise. Pink noise takes high-pitched noise and splits it. One is positive, the other is negative, and it lowers the pitch. So do you have any done any research on pink noise, Bruce?
No, in fact, it's the first time I've ever heard of that term, but maybe this is how the reverse Doppler is created by the metamaterials because of its unusual characteristics. They've found that the elements within the crystals within the metamaterials many times are what they call quasi-crystals, that they are not uniformly made up of just the same elements as in normal crystals, that they have a number of different types of elements that are bonded together to form a crystal in a very unconventional manner, and the interference of these atoms with together create the unusual characteristics of the metamaterial, which literally tries to separate itself from our physical reality. And that's part of the reason why these ships seem to be able to disappear and as if going into another dimension, is that they literally are internally another dimension that is not responding to the physics that is surrounding the craft. So the hull is literally like a membrane, a cell membrane that separates something very different inside from what we experience on the outside.
Now, who's done this this research on this metamaterial? Because I know that there's been an effort by some groups recently to get a hold of metamaterial, but obviously somebody has gotten a hold of some and has done obviously some extensive research on it.
Yes, and this material is also being fed to certain laboratories who are making these major breakthrough discoveries on materials that create these effects. That's how we discovered, the quasi-crystals and that the metamaterials are composed of alternating layers of different kinds of elements and crystals. The people that you are referencing, Jack Sephardi out in California is one of the leaders, I think, in understanding how the metamaterials work, and he's very vocal on an email thread that I'm part of. And also, you have Hal Puthoff and Eric Davis, who were associated with Robert Bigelow and to the Stars Academy, etc. So you have these people who are sort of intermediate between the shadow government or the top secret material that the government can't release, and the theoretical physicists who are using mathematics and other types of experimentation to be able to understand how this metamaterial makes these ships capable of doing what they're doing, so that inside the ships there literally is no gravity. It is completely isolated from our world and our physics that is on the outside. And I've photographed these ships doing double right-angle turns at fairly high speeds. And as you could imagine, that if this was a conventional aircraft doing that the pilots would end up as grease stains on the bulkhead. They could not survive with the G-forces. And also you have, one report I saw that they were able to calculate the speed of these craft through our atmosphere at Mach 20, and they could pass through water and travel in the oceans at hundreds of miles an hour. Now, how is this possible? With our physics, we can't do that. So something about this metamaterial and the structure of the craft itself and how it is powered that allows it to do the impossible. Mm-hmm. What we would understand today as we would think of it as just being magic.
Well, now we have one more comment from our listener Echo, who has had, extensive experience within this field, and the comment is check LMTAS. I'll say that again. LMTAS skunk works in reference to pink noise. So I think that's obviously something that you need to start looking into, Bruce.
Right. Well,
it's a
one
good
of the
source
things that
here.
I don't know if you realize this, but on the 17th of May, 1997, this was right before the activity stopped locally in the Pine Bush. But then Michelle Acosta, who has done the surveys all across New York State, she showed that the activity actually shifted to Long Island. It didn't actually stop. It just moved to Long Island and was no longer in the Pine Bush area. But on the 17th of May, 1997, Mark Whitford, his girlfriend, Dinah Bertrand, and myself went to one of our favorite locations, hoping to see something that night. And we didn't realize that we were being set up for a performance. And one of the first things that happened when we were setting up our cameras on Muddy Kill Lane, which is on the side of Thompson Bridge, overlooking the valley to our east, two triangular craft flew over us. And whoa, wait! And I may have gotten a picture of them as they went over with my camcorder, and then we became serious, realizing that there are a triangular craft flying around us at that time of night. And this is around 11 o'clock at night. And then one of us noticed that there was a pair of lights to the north over Muddy Kill Lane, which traveled north-south, and it was hovering. And so I had my camcorder, Sony camcorder, and Mark Whitford had his, and Dinah Bertrand had an SLR on a tripod, and she was going to take time exposures while we took video of anything that we saw. And then this pair of lights started to move towards us, and we started to film and record, and it started to do some stuff that was just impossible for a conventional aircraft. I mean, I don't know of too many conventional aircraft that can rotate their wings to their almost vertical to the ground and stay up in the air. But this craft was doing something similar to that. And then it flattened out, and as it got closer and closer, it brightened one of its lights extremely, and conventional lamps can't do that, not that bright. So we knew this was a triangular craft. But what we didn't realize, Tim, is that the government had given the okay to Skunk Works to give us a performance of the TR-3B. And we recorded this flight of the TR-3B as it came towards us, then banked to its left or our right. And as it banked, it continued to roll until it was flying upside down, and then it rotated so that it was flying sideways and upside down. And then it flipped over and descended. And as it descended, it was slowing down. And the photographs, the time exposures show this clearly, that it was defying gravity. Then it went down into the valley and went behind a whole bunch of trees and tree rows outlining farm fields. And it passed. We got beautiful pictures of that as it was flying sideways, just at treetop level. So that performance and all of those videos and photographs are on one of my websites, the BUFOD website, called the conventional, more triangular craft in the Hudson, Wallkill River Valley. And you can see this information. And I'm also going to be showing that video that I took at the Laughlin UFO Mega Conference in February next month. And I had shown it to the audiences at the Coffee 11 conference and the Extraordinary Technology Conference in Albuquerque in August of last year. And the audience loved it so much that I was given an offer to talk and show all of my material at the Laughlin conference in February.
Now, you said that this craft gave you a performance and that permission was given. for them to perform. Why do you think that permission was given? I mean, if these were
very good question.
Yeah, why if they're
And
top
if you
secret
if you go to my website, you'll see what happened. I'll tell you now.
Okay.
Is that Mark Whitford is a veteran of the Navy, and he he still has many friends who are in active service in the Navy, and one of his buddies in the Navy called him and said he was relaying information from his superiors, and this information came from the Pentagon, that you were given an authorized performance by the Skunk Works TR-3B.
So then, basically, what you're saying then is that we're dealing not only with some kind of craft of unknown origins, but man-made, top-secret, exotic technology craft as well.
Yes, they're called ETVs and ARVs. Mm-hmm. ETVs is extraterrestrial vehicles, and ARVs is alien reproduction vehicles. And the one I distinguish the two. I'm not sure if we have yet perfected a technology where our craft can pass through solid rock. Okay, but the ETVs can do this when they go to an underground base. Ellen Crystal, in her 10-year study in that same area of Pine Bush, she noted many of the craft would go right straight into the ground. And one particular time, she was out in a field, and this opening occurred. A tunnel appeared right before her going into the ground. It just opened up, and warm air came out of it, and then it closed again. And so she became convinced that there was all of this activity was disappearing under the earth into underground bases. That's what she had concluded in her book. And when I read that, I said I can test her theory with a proton magnetometer, and I went out and did a 24 square mile magnetic survey. It took me 3 years to complete, and when I got done, I was able to document and prove that the alien craft had bases underground, right, all the way up and down the valley, and it goes all the way over into the Hudson Valley as well.
Hey, Bruce, how about the sightings over the cemetery there in the Pine Bush? What's the significance of that? I mean, it seems odd, but we have had a lot of sightings over cemeteries. I mean, not just the one in Pine Bush, but in quite a few other locations. I know we've written it up in the UFOs Deja Vu book.
Well, one of the things that I found when I started my magnetic survey, that first day that I had borrowed a proton magnetometer, a very sensitive magnetometer used for geology. I borrowed it from Lamont Doherty, and with permission. And I was with my fiancée at the time, and we walked along Route 54 between Walden and Pine Bush that goes past this Jewish cemetery called the Beth Hillel Cemetery. And I was getting these spikes on the instrument that were 5 to 10,000 gammas above normal, and they would come about every 10 seconds. There'd be this bang, the spike on the instrument of magnetism, and I said, "What the hell?" I thought my instrument was malfunctioning, and I continued to take measurements and record them. I went all the way past the cemetery up to Allard Corners and turned on to Albany Post and walked up that one for a while, taking more measurements, pacing them out. And I took the instrument back to Lamont Doherty the next Monday and had them check it out, and they said it works fine. When I went out into the field the next day, that would have been a Tuesday or maybe a Monday night, all those spikes had disappeared. And but I started to use certain areas in my mapping. I did 1,800 stations over that 24 square miles, And there are certain locations I went back to again and again and again in order to get reproducible measurements or to see if there was any significant change in the measurements. And the one area that kept on changing was right in front of the Jewish cemetery. And I went back to this area, and I was amazed at the every once in a while I would go back there, and I would get these 10 to 11,000 gamma spikes every 10 seconds, again and again and again and again and again and again, and they weren't stopping. And I was saying, what the heck? Then I used the gradiometer configuration, and which has two sensors at the ends of a long pole, and that allowed me to determine the orientation of these spikes, where they were coming from. And not only was I able to determine that the spikes were coming out of a beam of energy that was coming out of the ground right at the edge of the cemetery and Route 54, but when I went behind the cemetery, I found another location that this energy was coming out of the ground. And I went to another location on the other side, further on the other side of the cemetery, and I found a third location. And these three places where these spikes were coming out, these magnetic spikes, were equidistant from each other, and they're approximately 485 feet apart. They were equidistant and formed a huge triangle, which was as big as a football stadium and apart. And I didn't know. I said, this is unnatural. This is not normal. And I went back there enough times that I found that these beams of magnetic energy were coming out of the ground every time the constellation Bootes was overhead. And so they were signaling, and then I had other people see this beam of white light coming out the center between these three magnetic locations when at night, and so that there was a signal beam coming out the center of this triangle area, and these magnetic beams at the corners of the triangle. And Scott Stride at JPL, he looked at my data, and he said that the magnetic beams are not the signal beams, but the beam in the center was the signal beam that was being oriented by the magnetic beams to a specific location in the sky. In other words, this object below ground was signaling what was at some distant point in space. What was also interesting is that all sorts of paranormal activity were occurring above this triangular area, such as it got colder during the summer and heat. I mean, the temperature would be 10 to 15 degrees colder over the cemetery, and then in the winter it would be warmer than the surrounding area, and snow on top of it would melt. And people also felt hum when they were standing on this triangular feature. And I realized that whatever it was below ground, embedded in solid rock. It wasn't until the History Channel came out in November of 2007, thanks to Bill Burns, who was the editor of UFO Magazine. He convinced the History Channel to come out and do a survey, and they brought a GPR, a ground-penetrating radar. They also brought their own magnetic detectors, and found out that at that one area next to the front of the cemetery that had where I initially saw these spikes, there was 1.7 Gauss measurement they got, and that was extremely high. I mean, it's totally unnatural that the power of these magnetic beams that were coming out of the ground. And the ground-penetrating radar, we cut across a corner of the triangle. We didn't go inside the cemetery, but just outside of it. And there, on the graphs that came up on the instrument, you could see a huge structure about 9 feet below the ground that was not being compressed, although all the rock sediments around it were being compressed, indicating that whatever it was is as old as the rock that it entombs it. And that rock is Ordovician in age, 420 million years old.
Okay, well, who is doing all this? I mean, what is the origin and the source of this?
I'm telling you, it's a mining probe that landed on Earth when that area was covered by an ocean. And you had these granitic mountains that were sticking up above the sea level at the time. And I found more than one location where these signals were coming out of the ground in the Pine Bush area. And
so are they being monitored by some intelligence?
Well, they are the beacons, I think, that are being picked up by a spacecraft out and say, hey, we just picked up this beacon. Let's go down and find out who's sending it. And that's why you have all of these craft coming to Pine Bush.
All right, we're going to have to wrap it up here. So, Bruce, why don't you let our audience know really quick, we've only got about a minute left, where they can find out more about you online.
If you just Google Dr. Bruce Cornet and go to my Monmouth Internet webpage, then you'll get links to my other web pages, and that will be a start.
Also, too, this will be up on our YouTube channel, where we'll have some photographs and artwork and everything that is involved in this. And it's wonderful to hear you talking about this. I mean, it's a great show, and you're doing some really outstanding research, and we got to have you back on in the very near future. And don't forget, Mr. UFO's Secret Files. That's our YouTube channel. And our book is Deja Vu, UFOs Over and Over Again. Wonderful show, wonderful week. Thank you, Tim. Thank you, Tina. Thank you, Peter. Thank you, Helen. And thank you, Bruce.
You've been listening to Exploring the Bizarre with hosts Timothy Beckley and Tim Swartz. They're taking back the night by jetting non-stop across the cosmos in search of the truly bizarre and totally unexplained, with you as their co-pilot. Thursday nights at 7 p.m. Pacific, 10 p.m. Eastern, on the KCOR Digital Radio Network. For more information on Exploring the Bizarre and hosts Timothy Beckley and Tim Swartz, check out their KCOR Digital Radio Network page. Follow their YouTube channel at MRUFO 1100. Exploring the Bizarre.